Good afternoon and welcome everyone into this amazing Saturday here together again with the SSP and all of those following us through the web, through Facebook and YouTube as well. And we welcome those as well who will be watching us in the future in this amazing endeavor that we'll be starting today with Kirsten. And we'll tell you a little bit more about it in a couple more minutes. But before we do so, let us give continuation to this amazing and warming welcome by reading a passage of the book Happy Life, and then we will pray together so we can continue with what we have started. Earlier today, when we woke up and we remind ourselves, oh, today is the day that we meet. Today is the day that we have a meeting where we can connect, sit down, change the vibration a little bit so we can prepare to what will be presented. So we can continue in this amazing environment that we have started prior to this meeting. On that note, Joanna de Angelis on this book called Happy Life through the hands of the medium Divaldo Franco says the following: have compassion for the weak, give them a friendly hand in any situation. In addition to their organic fragility, they are fearful and dependent, deficient in energy. Help them with the friendly smile of companionship, with a promise to tactic support, through a gesture that gives them security. Put yourself in their place and do for them what you would want done for you in that situation. So let us have compassion for one another, and as we pray as well, let us do our best to make sure that we send this vibration to others who could not be here with us today. On that note, dear Father, Mother God, we ask you that you guide our minds and our hearts throughout this moment that we'll have here in this afternoon into this evening. And we welcome one another with our hearts and our minds in the teachings that you have promised us to deliver to us so we understand ourselves better, so we understand who we are, where we came from, where we're going. But most importantly, with the basis that you already brought to us through our Master Jesus. This way, we send our vibrations to those who are connected with us in any way, shape, or form. We send our vibrations to those who are following us through the web. We send our vibrations to those who unfortunately could not be here or cannot be here with us. And we ask you that somehow they connect with us by watching this presentation, this moment in the future, so that they can receive the amazing health and conscientiousness that we are proposing here tonight. We ask that you guide the heart and mind of our dear friend Kirsten, so she can be the vessel of love to conduct this evening, these teachings. And we are very happy, grateful that she has put herself in the position to guide us, to bring us consolation, and most importantly, to share her time with us so in the future we can share our goodness with one another. We are thankful for all of this and much more, and so be it. So, dear friends, here we are in this amazing moment, starting a new endeavor, right, Kirsten?
Yes.
Today we are starting the studies or the conversations, if we can say that way too, about the book Time of Health and Conscientiousness. It is a book by the Spirit Joanna de Angelis as well, and the medium Divaldo Franco. Today she will be starting with the introduction of the book as well as chapter 1. So what other time, right? That we would this would fall in our what other better time, if we can say, that this teaching, this topic would fall in our lap, of time of health and conscientiousness, right? That the things that we're going through right now. So it's never enough for us to connect in this higher note. So I thank you, Kirsten, for starting this, and we pray for you that you give continuation. We will work together, read together, and discuss this book together. So with no further ado, please take us away.
Thank you so much, Leo. Let me just alter something here. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, and good evening, everyone that's joining us on the web or the recorded version of this. It is such a pleasure to be with everyone again today. Excuse me. So we finished up the first volume of Joanna's psychological series just recently, and that was Jesus in Our Days. And we wanted to give continuation to her psychological series. So I know that we shared this before, but just to kind of give us a reminder of how her psychological series is broken down. And you might be thinking, well, why are you doing volume 4? You just did volume 1, Kirsten. That doesn't make sense. Well, it'll make sense here in a second. So obviously we can only do these studies on the psychological series on the actual books that are in English for obvious reasons. So we couldn't do volume 2 and volume 3. You can go on our YouTube channel and see that Leo Vieira already did a whole book on plenitude. It's amazing. Go and check it out when you get a chance if you haven't already. So that's which leads us to go to the next volume, which is Times of Health and Conscientiousness. And so we hope to go down the line to do all the ones we can, and hopefully more of them will be translated into English by the time we get through the other books. But if not, we'll make do with what we have. And we will just immerse ourselves in this magical series that Joanna has. And indeed, it is quite magical. And I don't say that in jest. I say that because it feels almost magical. Her words, it's not only poetic and romantic, but it just feels like, if we are able to grasp it, bring it into our lives, and really have it. I'm going to take off my earring real quick because I think it's making a noise. And really have it in our day-to-day lives and really make it a part of our being. It really changes us, and that's the magical part of it. It's just so amazing, beautiful. More and more you study, and Joanna's books are not books to just read, before you go to sleep, lightly read or randomly read, although you can do all those things, but they really are like a textbook. Not in the boring sense, but in the sense that it's so rich and there's so much to digest. And even just one or two sentences alone can give rise to days and days of conversations within yourself, with others, with your partner or spouse or what have you. It's just so thought-provoking and so elevating to our minds. It just really broadens our perspective. So in this beginning chapter, rather I should say in the beginning introduction, Joanna she breaks down and she reminds us the age that we're currently living in. Now, what's interesting is that this book, and thank you, Leo, for reminding me of the date this was published, the original book, which was originally published in Portuguese, was actually published in 1991, 1992. And we think about that because, what she says then is even more true today because more time has passed, right? So she says, and she talks about how, the desire to have complete health, whether it's bodily, emotional, or mental, mind, body, and spirit, just overall complete and total health and wellness has been a desire. It's the most desired goal of any one being. And whether it was from the 1990s until now or at any point in time in our life, this rings true. And in the time that we're living right now, even more so than the 90s when she published this, obviously, we have the highest rates of longevity at this time. People are living longer. We're living longer. And why is that important? Well, maybe 50 or more years ago, or even 100, the life expectancy might have been, 40s and 50s, max. But now people are living well into their 70s, 80s, and 90s with a good deal of quality of life. We're not talking about just, people having poor quality of life. There's a great number of people that are living a good life at that age still. So why is that significant? That's significant because it gives us more time on this earth to accomplish more. Whereas before we were looking at close to half that time. And that's due to technological advances, advances in medicine, science, all things of that nature. And as she says, medical science has broadened its conceptual catalog as well regarding health and disease, has begun to include other disciplines that contribute effectively to people's well-being. Ergo, she's talking about, what we refer to in the health field is CAM, which is complementary and alternative medicine. So that has gained popularity. Yes, years and years ago was slowly gaining popularity, but even now, most health insurances cover acupuncture. That wasn't so decades and decades ago, unless you had some gold star health insurance. But now it seems like almost even some of the basic insurances, even the government insurance covers acupuncture. And there are some limitations in regards to age and whatnot. But still, we're looking at things and we're getting these opportunities that we didn't necessarily have before. So all these things are playing a role in our health, in our overall health. So these are important factors. These are important because these are positive, great things that are happening, have been happening and are happening in our society. And this is just a little a little snapshot of some of the complementary and alternative medicines that are out there today. A lot of us know most of these things are meditation, acupuncture, Ayurvedic medicine, chiropractic therapy, energy medicine, prayer, spirituality, homeopathy, etc., etc. So there's a lot more that's getting accepted into mainstream, and if not accepted, and at least utilized to some degree. It's quite amazing. And we brought this quote from the actual introduction we wanted to share because we thought it was very interesting. She says, Joanna, the modern findings of psychosomatic medicine have demonstrated that mental and emotional pathologies easily transfer to the body, setting the scene for various diseases. When the energy balance that sustains the cells is disturbed, immunological factors become altered under bombardment by destructive mental discharges, which encourages deadly agents to take root and grow and cause the body to break down. Science has already been proving this. Stress hormones that are released, the negative catecholamines that are released, and how they can negatively impact us, the effects of cortisol in our body, which is when we feel a heightened amount of stress. There are parts of our, just to make it very general and very basic, there are mechanisms within us, for fight or flight, which release certain catecholamines, certain hormones, certain endorphins in our body to facilitate our own self-preservation. However, it becomes an issue when those negative discharges are frequent and they become very harmful to our bodies. So we know that when she refers to this, these modern findings of psychosomatic medicine, that it's already proven it. Science knows that the more mental, emotional stress can have a physical effect in our bodies. We know that. So these are just kind of, she's letting us know, look, we have these great aspects of medicine and modern day life that we're living in. Because A, everybody wants to be happy. B, we're living longer because of science and technology. And science has demonstrated that, our mental health has an effect on our physical well-being. So these are all things that we know that are in existence. She goes on to say that's why it's imperative to usher in a new era of new awareness of responsibility so that lucid and balanced individuals may establish the paradigms for harmonious moral and mental conduct in order to acquire the priceless asset of health. And truly, health is priceless. It's very difficult to find happiness. It's more of a challenge when we go through illnesses, which inadvertently is a blessing because it makes us really truly appreciate and have immense gratitude for the times when we are healthy, for the moments that we are, for the simple things of life. Once you go through something, anything, whether it's a disease of the body, the mind, body, or spirit, and you're able to triumph over those things within yourself, you come out a much more grateful and centered, and as she refers to this lucid and balanced person. So it's time. And if we haven't, or if you haven't thus far, she says, now is the time to, this new way of life, this new vision, this new awareness of our responsibility that we have. Because really, we don't really have much of an excuse anymore. I mean, maybe 50 to 100 plus years ago, when we didn't have social media and the ease of information, I just was born on the tail end when encyclopedias were on their way out, kind of. So I remember being, in elementary school, I'm probably dating myself, going to an encyclopedia, opening the book. There was no, there was no internet, at least not in the way it was today. And so, all that I could know or anyone could know was, either you go to the library or you ordered a chunk of really good encyclopedias, and that was the extent of your knowledge. Nowadays we have Google. So you can Google literally anything, anything. And I please take that under advisement. Don't just Google random things. It can truly disturb your mind. But you can Google things, how to do meditation, and all other types of things that can benefit us. So we live in this wonderful age where we have no excuse, where we shouldn't be proceeding forward, where we shouldn't take advantage of all these amazing things. So friends, okay, I'm going to ask you all to do me a favor. I know that we're doing this live, and normally pre-pandemic, we were in a physical setting with people and we could see people's faces, but obviously we're still in the middle of this pandemic and getting settled. We are doing it over the internet, obviously. But one of the things if you don't mind, for those of you who are currently watching live, I want you just to take a deep breath in and out. And so I know that you're doing this, I want you to just drop any type of emoji in the comment section. It can be a heart, it can be a star, it can be a laughing emoji, it can be any emoji, it can be a flower, it can be a butterfly. Because butterflies are such a significant part of the meaning behind this book. And I think it's not by chance that when you look on the cover of this particular book, you see a bunch of butterflies. And it really has a lot to do with the philosophy, with the idea, or the metaphor, rather, I should say, the metaphor behind. Thanks, Katya. I see she dropped a heart. Thanks so much. It has a lot to do with the metaphor behind a butterfly. Don't take don't judge a book by its cover. At first, you might look at a caterpillar and think that, wow, what's it ever going to be? It's just this little insect that's kind of ugly and nothing. But then it goes to this huge transformation. Thanks, Julia, for dropping your stars. I only have access to the YouTube live, so I'm sorry if you're on Facebook. Go ahead, drop your emojis. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Juliana. Yeah, so this book has a lot to do with the metaphor of the butterfly, the transformation a butterfly goes through, and goes through that temporary period of struggle, and then it emerges as this beautiful butterfly. And it's awe-inspiring because it went from having one life where it was completely stuck on the ground and limited to being free and flying. So I want you all to join me. Thank you all for dropping your emojis, just so I know that you're there. You are being intentional, because it's so important that everything that we do, that we are intentional with it. So in the beginning of this book, as a matter of fact, let me go back for a second. This book is comprised of 2 parts. Each part has 20 chapters each. Thanks, guys, for dropping your emojis. Thanks, Paula, Chris. This book is comprised of 2 parts. Part 1 deals with health, and the second part deals with topics of conscientiousness. The first part, Joanna has beautiful, before each chapter, she has beautiful, amazingly uplifting affirmations. So for the next 20 chapters that we go over, we are going to be having and sitting together and saying these affirmations out loud. Now, if we were all in a room together, I could hear you saying it, but I want you to promise me that you're going to be saying this out loud along with me right now, because we're going to be setting the tone. There's a reason why Joanna has these affirmations before each chapter on this first half. So let us begin by doing this first affirmation. Say it with me. Divine consciousness flows through me. Divine consciousness flows through me. God sustains and leads me all the days of my life. God sustains and leads me all the days of my life. There is an ebb and flow of force that runs through me and drives me forward. It is up to me to coordinate the activities, choose the goal, and move ahead. Submitting myself to that life force, everything becomes accessible to me, and I can reach the fruition of my aspirations in peace. Now would be the time, if you were watching through your cell phone or what have you, to take a screenshot of this beautiful affirmation that sets the tone for chapter 1 of this beautiful book. Why this is so important, because we want our minds to shift. We want our vibration to shift. We want it to be a higher vibration. We want to open up our mind and our heart and our vital centers / chakras to be ready to allow this knowledge from this chapter to pour into every cell, every mitochondria of our cells, to bring healing. So this divine consciousness can just flow. And everything that's blocking us, any negativity, any blocks that we have anywhere, may they be cleared, and may you find peace. Let us begin. Chapter 1's entitled Deciding to be Happy. We'll jump right into it. She says, do your best to make your life pleasant for yourself and others. And in another one of her books, I believe it's in Happy Life, or it's in her book, Open Your Heart and Find Happiness. She has common themes that weave through many of her books, where Joanna says, to be happy, it is a decision, but it's a decision in the respect that it's like, okay, step 1, decide that you want to be happy. Step 2, start doing things that make you happy, setting goals, reevaluating our lives, reevaluating ourselves, and proceeding forward and marching forward with those. It's not a magical thing where it's like, snap your fingers just because I decided to be happy, mysteriously everything will fall into place. Not quite. We do really need to make that decision, whether you're saying it through an affirmation or you're waking up in the morning saying that to yourself, like, I choose happiness today. That does not mean that you won't struggle. That does not mean that you won't encounter emotions that are challenging. As a matter of fact, you will. You will still encounter emotions that are challenging and that push you, but it's a matter of perspective, how we're looking at those emotions. We really like the model of um, internal family systems, or IFS therapy work, where I apologize, I forget the name of the. I think it's Richard Schwartz is the man who created it. And the idea is that we are comprised of many different parts of ourselves. So that's why there's a part of me that sometimes feels pulled in one direction, and there's a part of me that might feel pulled in another direction. Like there's a part of me that wants to be happy, but there's this other part that feels bad for X, Y, and Z. So in this understanding, and a lot of Joanna's teachings in Spiritism brings us to this same knowledge, is that when we're dealing with these different parts of ourselves that are presenting, that come about, that just appear within ourselves, sometimes out of nowhere or sometimes because things are happening, we shouldn't look at those parts of ourselves as broken parts, as parts that are bad or negative, but that need healing, or that need something from us, that need us heal our inner child or bring healing to some part of us that we're not aware of. And this is a part of making our life pleasant for ourselves. Really utilizing any and all tools we can to make our life the best it can possibly be. Joanna goes on to say, it's important that everything you do has a positive meaning, that it provides new stimuli for you to continue your life, which ought to be characterized by enriching experiences. So everything having a positive meaning for us also means living with intention, living on purpose. And everything that we do, because we're living intentionally, let's make it something positive that has a positive reasoning behind it. Something that I learned from my spouse, who does this a lot. I noticed, being married for almost 9-10 years, I had to think for a second, is that often he will always, and this used to annoy me in the beginning, but always analyze why he was doing something or why he watched this TV show. Like there had to be a reason, a purpose. And if there wasn't a purpose, there was something wrong. And then that really was very insightful, and it really has taught me a lot, because it's living with purpose and intention. It's desiring to want to live a positive life that has positive meaning, and that everything that I'm exposing myself to is good. Where Joanna says, this new stimuli that's enriching. So it's living conscientiously. And she reminds us in this text, she says, Look, people around you are not always going to be happy for you. And we're paraphrasing her words. She says, if the people around you do not comply with your decision to be happy, do not get discouraged. Peacefully continue to generate well-being. Not everyone's going to be on the same page as you. Even the people that we choose to make a life with, especially people we choose to make a life with, are people that we're families that we're born into. Don't always might not be convenient for them or what have you. There could be 1,001 reasons. But the point is that once we make that decision, let's stick to it. Don't get discouraged. Continue to generate this well-being and surround yourself with like-minded people who are striving for the same thing. She says we are responsible for ourselves and, as a result, our actions. Just reminding us of our personal responsibility. She goes on to say that all the great leaders of humanity have struggled until they reached their goal, attaining what they had chosen as happiness as central for their ongoing search. And she begins to talk about certain great thinkers, leaders of humanity. She mentions the Buddha. Buddha renounced all the comforts of being a prince to attain enlightenment. We know Buddha was born with a silver spoon. He was born into a wealthy family, but he gave all that up to attain enlightenment. Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, some of you might be familiar with the religion of Islam. Muhammad suffered persecution, yet remained indomitable until he achieved his goal. Mahatma Gandhi was arrested many times, but he did not fight back. He stayed faithful to his plans of nonviolence and freedom for his people. And I believe it was Mahatma Gandhi who inspired Martin Luther King Jr. to follow the nonviolence resistance. And it was his life that really inspired Martin Luther King Jr. to not want to be, violent in the protests, but to be, peaceful protests. So something very amazing that inspired not just Martin Luther King Jr., who obviously was famous, but many, many others, many, many, many others. And of course, she mentions the great master himself, Jesus. She said, and Jesus chose the infamous cross rather than change his love-based behavior. So, authenticity. People remained authentic and true to their central desire for what they wanted to achieve, for what they believed was happiness for them. Whether it was the aforementioned people here, Buddha, Muhammad, or Gandhi, or Jesus, our model and guide, governor of this planet, he stayed true to it. And she mentions about being authentic. She says, all those who long to become one with cosmic consciousness generate both affinity and animosity, which seems perplexing. But here's why. She says, they are always dealing with other people's opposing sentiments. Even so, they stay true to themselves. I'm sure if anyone that's watching has had this experience, that when you're trying to become a better person, Joanna says it in a very beautifully poetic way, becoming one with the cosmic consciousness, finding balance in our lives and trying to maintain that, trying to have a spiritual life, we're going to come across people that don't agree with us, that it generates this animosity. They get angry, whether it's family or friends or coworkers or what have you. It's this dichotomous life that we're going to live. You're going to find people that you feel so much affinity with and so close to, and feel like they're your soul brother and sister. And then there's others where it's like, wow, they just really are throwing a lot of hate my way. But even still, we have to remain true to ourselves, just as Gandhi did, just as many other great thinkers remained that way, authentic to their beliefs, because it's for the belief of goodness, of spreading this love towards others. And she says, they know they can always count on themselves and, of course, God. And I once heard someone say, who was in a rather high position, and you can sometimes you hear this in movies and in books. There's this common phrase that says, it's lonely at the top. Not that people who are working towards their, spiritual ascendancy are at the top, or that they're better than anybody else, because they're not. They're just doing work. But sometimes when we're doing that work, it can get lonely because not everyone's on that path with you. And nowadays, I see a lot of this within different, sh- you know, um, social media groups. You can find a lot of online social media groups, like support groups of any different type, whether you're looking to lose weight, or you're looking just a group for moms, or if you're looking for a group just for, guys to talk about cars or whatnot. There's all types of stuff like that. But we can see that there is this new verbiage that's used, and it's finding your tribe. Finding your tribe, meaning finding people that don't believe exactly necessarily as you do, although they might, but really are searching and reaching for the same goals that you are reaching for. And surrounding yourself, not necessarily in a physical sense, but even virtually, surrounding yourself with people that are on that same road with you can really give us a boost in what we're trying to accomplish. But at the end of the day, there are two things we can definitely count on ourselves and God above all. She goes on to say, those who choose a life enriched with peace and well being are not trying to get out of suffering, struggling, and difficulties. Now, we found this statement rather interesting. And Joanna says, people who choose a life enriched with peace and well being, they're not trying to get out of suffering, struggling, and difficulties. You drop in the comment section now if this is you, or if you agree with this or not. For those of you who are choosing a life enriched with peace and well being, are not trying to get out of suffering, struggling, and difficulties. This is really fascinating because you would think most of us, we are desiring to get out of our suffering and struggling, right? We would think that. But Joanna goes on to say, on the contrary, these always appear as perturbing challenges which individuals must face without losing their way or altering the pleasure they experience and preserving their chosen behavior. So, dear reader, transform your painful stimuli into positive contributions and do not complain, suffer, or give up. Let's read that again. Those who choose a life enriched with peace and well being are not trying to get out of suffering, struggling, and difficulties. On the contrary, individuals must face without losing their way or altering the pleasure they experience and preserving their chosen behavior. So, we did a lot of thinking about that, and a lot of praying, and a lot of reflecting and personal reflection. And for us, although it might be different for other people, but for some of us, when we really sit down and think about desiring peace, choosing a life of well-being. It's not that we want to run away. It's the opposite. We become more courageous. There's this sense of strength. Once we tap into this divine consciousness within us, you begin to tap into a strength you may not have ever known you had. And so you don't become afraid of facing the shadows, facing the darkness. You become ever more perseverant and wanting to just continue on that pathway. And we love this image in the background of with this image in the on your screen is supposed to be showing, and I hope it does, not sure if it is being able to be calm within a storm. You see this boat and you see the waves that are crashing around it, but right in the middle of where this little boat is, the sun is shining and the waves are calm. And that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for just to, escape, but we can still be in the world, live in the world, and maintain our inner peace. It's not going to be perfect all the time. It's not going to be on point. We're going to miss the mark sometimes more than others. But that's not the point. The point is that we keep going. We put one foot in front of the other, and when we fall, we don't fall in the same place. We just keep on going. And Paula, thanks for your comment on the YouTube live stream. She says, as long as we are in the earth school, there will always be challenges, but the stronger our inner peace, the less psychodrama. Amen to that. Amen to that, Paula. So very true. So very true. And so let's be reminded, transform our painful stimuli into positive contributions and do not complain, suffer, or give up. Let's open a brief parenthesis here. I don't ever believe that Joanna is saying that we can't talk about our emotions. This doesn't mean that we have to pretend that we don't feel negative emotions. That's not what this is about. So let's clear up that if anyone has any questions about that. No. Joanna is all about emotional intelligence, understanding our emotions, knowing what they are, identifying them, learning how to manage them. And sometimes that means going to a professional. In the same way, if you had an issue with your heart, you would see a cardiologist. If you had an issue with your kidneys, you would see a nephrologist. If you had an issue with you would see a gastroenterologist, and so forth and so on. If you had an issue with your brain, you could see a neurologist. So there's a stigma around, well, if I have issues with my emotions, well, I'm crazy if I go see a therapist or a psychologist or what have you. Nowadays, there's this huge boost of life coaches that are out there. I think because people like that term more, it seems less attached to that stigma of mental health issues. But Joanna's going to talk about that here in a second. But it's not that she doesn't want us to express if something is difficult to us, and it's not wrong to express that, wow, this is hard. But when we live our lives, she wants to teach us that to live with intention. So when we are complaining, let's think for a second. Let's rewind a little bit and ask ourselves, in this moment, am I living with my intention? What is it here? What part of myself has surfaced that needs healing from me? There's a part that's hurting. That's why that part is expressing, complaints or wanting to give up. But in reality, that's just that needs healing, that needs to be loved, that needs to know that it's worth living, that it has value. And sometimes we have to be that person for ourselves, to love that inner child or that inner part of ourselves, to bring that healing. And we change our perspective when seeing that, those bad things within us. No, they're not bad. They're just parts of ourselves that need healing. And recently we were studying on our Thursday nights the book Heaven and Hell. Not recently, we've been studying it for a while now. And we read this case, a case of Miss Emma, and it really struck us. And allow me to share this very, very, very brief story of her. We're not going to bring a whole long history of her, nor do we really have that. But even if we did, we wouldn't have time. But very brief story for those of you who are with us on Thursdays. You already know this story, so bear with us. So this is the case of Miss Emma. It's in the book Heaven and Hell. Heaven and Hell is one of the 5 books of the codification of Spiritism. In case you didn't know, it's this particular actual story is in the chapter and the part of the happy spirit. So Miss Emma is actually a happy spirit. So she lived in France. Her name was Emma Livre. She lived in 1842 and she died on July 26, 1863. She was the adopted daughter and ballerina of protege Madame Taglioni. She died around age 21 in Paris 8 months after receiving burns when her costume caught fire from a gaslight while rehearsing on the stage of the French opera. And again, she was listed under the happy spirits. To bring some actual real photographs on her that you actually can find on the internet, because she was someone who was well known in her time to some degree or another, I should say, had some level of notoriety. And you read about, just to kind of give context so people understand the significance of this. So at that time, the flame retardant clothing that they wanted the ballerinas to utilize so they wouldn't catch fire, because it actually had been a very common thing that was happening a lot. So they began to create flame retardant material. But the problem is that the clothing and the outfits that these ballerinas would wear that were flame retardant and safer were also not very aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And part of the beauty, for those of you who have ever done ballet, I did it in high school, but I'm by no means don't consider myself anywhere near like a ballerina or anything. But the outfit for your shows are such a huge part of the ensemble and part of the artistic expression. So it's part of the reason probably why she did not want to wear the flame retardant clothing and her outfit, and that's why it caught fire. These are just other pictures of her in that time. And this actually is a sarcophagus containing her actual burnt tutu. It's in Paris, France, in this particular Paris Bibliothèque Nationale. And yes, it exists. It's there. And if you're ever going to Paris or visiting, you somewhere there, I'm sure you can Google it and find out where it is. They have her actual burnt tutu, what was left. So why is it interesting? Well, she gave 2 communications. She gave one just a few days after her death, and one the day after that particular communication. But we're going to talk about the communication that happened on July 30th, 1863. Now, keep in mind, she died on July 26th, 1863, and she gave this communication just a few days later. So she says, and we kind of just gave a little excerpt because her communication was a little bit longer, a little bit too long. She says, "Those who suffer while on earth receive recompense in the other life. Be resigned if you are stricken. Bow before the supreme goodness of the omnipotent God whenever he gives you a heavy burden to bear. If he calls you after a great suffering, and if there's no complaining or moaning in your heart, you will perceive the recompense that God has reserved for you. You will see in the other life, the happy life, how little the pain and suffering of earth are. Always worship God, love him with all your heart. Pray to him above all. Pray to him confidently. He who is your support while on earth, your hope, your salvation." She also gives another communication where she talks about how although she suffered from the time she received, she actually caught on fire, and historical records say it was a huge fire, that her entire self was like a 30 or 40% of really bad burns. Um, for some reason, all except her face was not that badly burned. And from that time and until 8 months, she went through this long period of suffering, and she ended up dying of what was believed to be, an infection in her blood, otherwise known as septicemia, which would have been common at that time because they didn't have the same, um, techniques of cleaning and being cleanly when dealing with wounds and things of that nature. They didn't have the same exact, what we call aseptic technique nowadays. So it was quite common for people, to die secondary, to their actual disease or illnesses. So she died because of an infection because they weren't able to prevent it. What was significant is because she became, aware, she awakened on the other side quite quickly, and she was very balanced and, spiritually and emotionally put together. And she had lived her life, um, in quite a good way, as we can see, because by the nature of her communication, just reading here, the advice that she gives to us from beyond the grave is similar to what Joanna was talking about. You know, is understanding, not running away from our suffering. And this might seem at first like, oh gosh, I just have to accept suffering. No, it's not about that. Remember what Joanna said, that, for those of us who are seeking this spiritually fulfilled lives, aren't looking to run away from struggles. We understand that they're an intricate part of our personal growth, and that with our faith and we gain courage and hope, that these are just, we look at them as just as a part of our lives, as a natural progression in life. Joanna goes on to say, those who see only suffering in the struggle have a pathological problem that needs appropriate treatment. We wanted to mention something about this as well because, with mental health awareness and how much the paradigm has been shifting the last decade or so, to say it's okay to seek help if you're not doing well. There's a great organization called NAMI. For those of you who may not know about it, it's open for families and individuals affected by mental illness. The helpline is free, it's confidential, provides information, referrals, and support, and it's open Monday through Friday, 8:30 till 5. You can actually text if you don't want to call someone. We live in the age of text. I know people love to grab their cell phone and just text. It's easier. You can text it at 919-999-6527, and this is within the United States. So I'm sorry if you're living in a different state, in Canada, different country, rather, continent. You're probably going to have to Google in your area. But for those of you who are within the continental US, this is just a really great way for you to reach out. And don't be afraid to ask for help, because it's okay when we need help. Joanna goes on to say that life is a blessing and should be kept healthy, cheerful, and promising, even when under the liberating imperative of trials and expiations. And for those of you who haven't read or studied Heaven and Hell, it's a really great book to read because there's so many counts of people who went through tremendous hardships, but were still able to maintain and at least strive for to be at peace, to have some semblance of happiness despite all the hardships they're enduring. She says, Joanna, if you make your life enjoyable, all your days will be fruitful and sunny. Oops, good one. I'm going to read this again. If you make your life enjoyable, All your days will be fruitful and sunny. It's something amazing. If you ever had a chance to listen to the Dalai Lama give interviews, it's one of the most amazing things to watch because he seems to be such a jovial person, always smiling, and his life has not been without tremendous hardships. And not only the Dalai Lama, but Divaldo Franco, who many people within the Spiritist community know, you've been to either heard of him, watched his seminars, or seen him in person. It's amazing that even outside of giving lectures, if you've ever been blessed with the opportunity to see him, just sort of walking about, he is such a jovial soul, always telling jokes of the good kind, not of the, tasteless kind, but always just wanting to smile and find joy. And if you've read his biography or seen his story of his life, it's hardship after hardship after hardship. But he didn't let that define him. And it shouldn't define any of us. We should use that as a tool, as a stepping stone for our own benefit. As my mother used to say, my grandmother used to say that, it's a common phrase, if you have lemons, make lemonade. We make something useful out of it, something good to come out of it. So as we finalize now, we are at the end of our presentation, we wanted to do one last affirmation. And I want all of you, again, to take this moment, this brief moment for yourself, because you deserve it. Self-care is so important. And saying positive affirmations, they work. So I'm going to ask you once again to drop an emoji in the comment section. It can be anything. It could be a heart. It could be a star. It could be a smiley face. It could be a unicorn. Not really sure if they have unicorns. It could be anything. But let's set this intention right now to be present and to say this with all of our heart and our soul. Join me in saying this particular affirmation that's on your screen. Say it with me out loud. And I can hear you guys. Don't let the microphone, this whole virtual thing trick you. I know if you're saying it or not. So say it with me. I am in charge of how I feel. And today I am choosing happiness. I am in charge of how I feel. And today I am choosing happiness. I'm in charge of how I feel. And today I choose happiness. And do you feel that sort of lightness over your heart chakra or vital center? Just that little bit lighter feeling, slightly, ever so slight. Thank you guys for dropping your emojis, by the way. So let's, tune into that divine within us. Make time for ourselves to say these affirmations. We are all busy. We all only have 24 hours in a day. We all don't have the same responsibilities, but we all have only 24 hours in a day. Let's make the best of it and remind ourselves to utilize the tools that we have to generate the best outcome for ourselves. And last but not least, to leave you with this thought, to choose happiness, be authentic, learn the power of now, be realistic, know your priorities, learn to let it go, control your options, be grateful, celebrate along the way, give to others, and invest in you. So thank you all so much for partaking in this presentation and for staying with me and for throwing lots of beautiful emojis in the comment section. I so appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsten, and thank all of you who actually participated. It's a great way, Kirsten, to get people to really pay attention and
Right?
acknowledge that they are actually listening. That's a great way to acknowledge. So, thank you. As we were saying at the beginning, this is an amazing endeavor that you're starting here with us because all that we're going through, all the different mixed feelings that we have, that we have marinated. Inside of us with what's going on, the difficult moments that we have been spending throughout this whole thing that is going on. We get bombarded day in and day out with all different issues, right? So it's an amazing thing that you're bringing these affirmations, the reminder that we have to be in the moment. So great topic to discuss. And on that note, I would like to say, as we already did, in many ways, our hellos and welcoming to all of those who are here with us. Many of them have acknowledged with their beautiful emojis here, and dive into the questions and comments that we have. You already actually covered one, but we'll go back to it when Paula actually mentioned. But before we would like to start actually with Yasko when she says, "It is up to me to coordinate the activities, choose the goal, and move ahead. That is it." So I don't know if you have a comment, if we can move on, but it is so true, right?
Yeah, no comment to that. Just, yeah, Joanna's words. It's like right on. Exactly.
And then she moves on to say, "If it is all up to us and to be happy is a decision of our part, why many have such a difficulty whining to the extent to get sick, kill themselves? How to break this chronic unawareness of our power to take hold of our happiness?"
That's a fantastic question. It's a very deep question, and I think it probably warrants much more than just a few minutes of my humble response. But I will say this: we are complex beings, that we carry so many. And in the book um, that was psychographed by Ivone Pereira, um, Memoirs of a Suicide, she talks about people that have this. It actually becomes like a habit, whether it's a mental habit. Definitely it's a mental habit where whenever things become difficult, our mind already turns to cutting things off, ending things. It becomes just like a mental habit. In the same way, we have other mental habits of like um, just talking to. Again, I apologize for the personal anecdote. I was talking to my spouse today, and he was talking about, before he used to be the one to take care of certain things in our household, and now I've taken them over. And he was explaining his mental breakdown of how he used to view those things. And now my perspective, because I have the habit of doing it a different way. So even now that I've taken over this certain aspect of our, life together, he still has the mental habit of constantly going back to the same thought process. And it just goes to show you that, we are creatures of habit, whether it's a mental or physical habit. So why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because it's extremely difficult. It is extremely difficult. It's challenging. We're not going to sugarcoat it. When you try to better yourself, yeah, it's challenging. So whether you're trying to break that habit of negative thought patterns, if you're trying to break that habit of not going to those dark thoughts. And it reminds me of a story of Chico Xavier that he told about this gentleman who he used to help in his city or where he lived. And this particular gentleman, he was born with no arms. I think it was no arms, no legs, or he was born with completely contracted, like his body, his bones were completely contracted into themselves. And it was kind of like he was just lived in like this ball. And they used to go and help and bring food to him and all these kind of things for him. And one of Chico's workers turned to him one day and said, Chico, like, what kind of quality of life does this guy have? Like, is it even that great? Um, and Chico was talking about how, actually, no, I think I'm confusing two stories in one. Let me go back real quick. Both stories are actually really good. So many stories in my mind. So actually, it's a story of the man with the I believe it's the no arms and no legs. And it has to do with the fact that that particular gentleman had had so many lifetimes where he would take his own life. So higher spirituality and God, in order for him not to continue to commit suicide, to take his own life, was for him to come with a lot of disabilities, physical disabilities, where he literally wasn't unable to do those things. And so the story goes is that in talking about his case, they were saying that at least in that lifetime, although he was so debilitated and wasn't able to do much, he did not have those negative thoughts of wanting to commit suicide. So it is something to really be worked on. Something that, for sure, if you are a person who's ever had suicidal thoughts or have attempted suicide, for sure, it's something that you have to get with a professional about. Whether it's a therapist or psychologist, whatever kind of specialist that you need to see pertaining to your particular situation, it's important for us to acknowledge and not be afraid um, to work on those things. And so, yeah, it is possible to be happy. It's difficult, it's challenging, but remember, when we're choosing spirituality, when we're choosing to live a life of intention, positivity, and just wanting to be present and, be cognizant, to be, conscientious, it doesn't mean that life is going to be easy. It just means that we're going to begin to have this courage and this strong desire. Well, obviously, we already have that, to continue to plow through the difficulties, to keep going, to keep moving. And much like people who want to get into shape, what if you want to look like a bodybuilder or what have you, you get a personal trainer. It's no different when you're trying to get your mind and spirit and emotions right. We need a personal trainer. But we happen to call that personal trainer a therapist, psychologist, a counselor, a life coach, whatever you want to call it. Those are the things we need to do for us to build that muscle. So, and I think her other question, I hope I answered, is how to break this chronic unawareness of our power, take hold of our own happiness. I mean, it's living a life of intention, living a constant life of intention, living life intentionally, and constantly doing self-reflection. And yeah, it's work. It is work. Sometimes it could be even exhausting, mentally exhausting at times if you're not used to it. But it's a change of habit like anything else, you know?
Amazing, Kirsten. Thank you. And it's amazing. It's good that you actually clarified something that, the intention to live a happy life, that doesn't mean we will be worry free, right? That doesn't mean that we're not going to have any challenges in our life. So thank you for that clarification, because one thing needs to be separate from the other, right? And then we need to kind of put things aside, but the intention needs to be there. So, and that is really reassuring, by the way. Ronaldo actually made a comment saying everyone moved by their free free will can choose, a different path. Very true. And then he says it takes time to accept. I think this is related to the part that when you're saying that our choices may not be accepted by others, or others will not live the way we want to live. So I believe he was making this comment then. And then moving on to Paula's comment that I believe you already mentioned, as
Yeah.
long as we are in the Earth School, there will always be challenges, but the stronger our inner peace, the less psychodrama that we will have. Very true as well. And you stop me if you want to make comments on this.
Mhm.
And then another guy actually posed a question. Who's this guy?
Who is this
Well,
guy?
here it is. Living in the moment is a key element of being healthy and conscientious. This way, how can we put aside our daily worries and struggles so that we can be in the moment without a great level of suffering?
We can't.
Simply put.
We can't. It's a fallacy to think that one cannot exist without the other. We can live in this moment, acknowledge our struggles, our daily worries, and, you know, understand their purpose and still be able to strive and work towards happiness and self-fulfillment and have inner peace. It's not about, and it's often this misunderstanding of spiritual walk is that you're going to magically remove every struggle and every pain is going to go away. No, quite the opposite. It's that you learn to utilize that as a tool, because that's what it is. It's a tool for us to grow. And the more we begin to reframe our circumstances and rephrase it to ourselves. Because oftentimes we're telling ourselves, like, man, this situation is terrible. It's horrible. It's all these things and this. What did I do in my past life? Stop. You don't know. None of us know. But what we do know is that whatever I've done in this life, something has brought me to where I am today. And because of the law of progress, we know that we're destined for happiness. So whatever is going on, it's meant to lead us to that happiness. Because there's this law of progress, and it's this beautiful law that says, listen, you're always on your way up. You might be like going up and like stopped. You're never going to go back, but you're always on your way up. So whatever you're encountering, it's meant to be there to help us to grow, to become more self-aware. So there is no, how do I take this suffering out of my life and just be happy? No, when you're truly on this path, you understand your perspective is different.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification, and it's very helpful as well. And then we move on to Yasko. Yasko says, I am wondering how the kids, teens, have been taught about it. An example, to face their emotions, to be aware of the negative feelings, to have control, and etc. That the world outside does not prevent or solve our emotional problems. So I guess it's more a comment than a question, and she's wondering about it.
Yeah, so because I'm a parent of a teen, or dare I say, a young adult, um, I'm going to have to say that in my limited experience, and mind you, this is just the experience that I've had in this present life. Everyone's experience is different, so take it for what it's worth. But we, as the parents, we as leaders, whether we're teachers, and remember, in our social circles, whether you want to be or not, you are an example for someone, whether it's a teen, a kid. I can't tell you how many memories I have of spiritist events as a child, my parents, and I say dragging us to, in every sense of the word, because we didn't understand it that at a very young age, like what this was, and also the fact that it wasn't in our native language, English. But we can recall all the amazing people that we met and how their example helped shape our lives, helped to shape and decipher what is a good person and what it looks like to be good, to be kind, to make mistakes and yet come back from it. So we are the example for our teens, first and foremost. So if you're living with your teenager, how are they handling it? Well, it's going to be a direct, usual reflection of how we, the parent, have been handling it. So I will say one thing, something we observed recently in our circle at the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, even everything's been virtual. Something that we've witnessed that was quite beautiful. And Leo, I'm going to mention your child, one of your children, or both of them, Luciana, who for those of you who are not aware, that is Leonardo's youngest child. I think she's 16, right, Leo? So, I'm not sure when this began happening, but she began to get heavily into meditating and into a lot of esoteric and spiritual things, when the rest of people her age are not doing those things. But there are, believe it or not, and I know it's hard to believe, especially with, every generation thinks that the generation after them is failing incredibly. It's really not true. There is a whole world of people, of young people on social media that are sharing this idea that spirituality is cool. Knowing your emotions is cool. Seeing a therapist is okay. And not being okay, that's okay too. So, what I've witnessed firsthand is that aspect of it, of seeing these kids, and obviously, you know, um, Leo's kids come from a Spiritist household, and my daughter as well. Although I'm not preaching saying that our children are like the best. Nope, they're like everyone else. They have their faults and issues and all the kind of stuff. But it's been amazing to see this shift of spirituality and our kids' desire to be more into meditation. And just the other day, Friday, I took a drive with my oldest, my daughter, my oldest, and she was, teaching me things. And she said, you have to really watch what you say because your words have power. And then they create this energy field around you. And she started to say all these things. And at first, I'm thinking in my mind, like, I, I, okay, I know this, but I told myself, listen, be humble. There's a lot to learn still. So I was listening and I thought, this is beautiful. This is great. I'm glad that, and I don't, and really a lot of it has to do with, some of it has to do with social media. So I don't think these kids nowadays, this new generation is so, um, without resources. Thank God that the newer generation is much more accepting and many more things are becoming to light. We're living in the age where emotional intelligence is being embraced. Kids and children have never had so much value than they do today. Even, and I'm not that old. I don't think I don't think I'm that old. I'm almost 40, but I remember growing up and it's just kind of like I lived in the environment where it was like, the belief was when you're a kid, you speak when spoken to, and you're seen, not heard. And that's not the case nowadays. So it's a different life we're living in.
Sometimes even the opposite, right? What the But I
Yeah.
want to say this. Thank you, Kirsten, for explaining and bringing these examples. And I'm not saying this for myself. I'm saying this for you. Recently, and I think I mentioned this here a couple of times already. I've heard of a comment that Chico Xavier made that parenting is 80% example and 20% putting limitation on on the kids,
Mm.
right? So it definitely. And the opposite is true as well. In order for us to exemplify good things, we have to limit ourselves because we also have our needs, we also have our wants, we also bring our baggages from the past. So it's quite difficult. It's not easy, and there is no manual, right? I guess we really have to that. Well, let's say a book that we can open and go right to it. We have to go within ourselves and find that book inside of us, that manual inside of us. So thank you for that explanation. And then we move on to Paula's comment when she said, questioned rather, how does one keep up with current events and maintain happiness?
Great question.
Yes.
Social media or different media oftentimes have their own agenda. So be mindful of the media outlets that you listen to or watch or feed yourself with. I personally really love websites like the Good News or goodnewsmovement.com, where it's a website where they share news, current news, current events, but they're largely positive. So, it's interesting because then you begin to feel like, oh, well, the world's not such a bad place after all. You're not hearing, killing after killing and this person and that person. And a friend of mine has this. She posts a lot on her social media about the number of murders in Baltimore City and all these things in that nature, and that's fine. It's fact. It's what's going on. It's our reality. But there also is another reality that there are a lot of great things happening. There are amazing outreach opportunities and instances that are occurring, and a lot of new programs that have been created since COVID, and a lot of people that are doing amazing things. So, and this is a silly analogy, or maybe it isn't. I remember one day I was working with a coworker of mine back when I worked in the intensive care unit. And she turned to me one day and just said, "Man, it just seems like everybody's sick these days." And I thought about that for a second. And I turned to her and I said, we do work in a hospital. So all we see is sick people. So that's probably why you kind of feel that way. And then she thought, yeah, you're kind of right, because we're just day in and day out spend a vast majority of our time at work, which is constantly surrounded by sick people, that you forget that there are really healthy people out there that actually do take care of themselves or who don't have chronic illnesses. So, it's important to gain perspective, and it's important to step back a little bit and be, again, living intentionally and being able to watch, maybe not video. And for me, I don't like watching video news. I much rather read news, because it's harder to misportray in if, at least to me, in written content, and it's less triggering for me personally. So, again, be mindful and be intentional with what you're listening to, and the news media outlets that you're listening to. And you can go back and forth and compare to see which ones are sharing what, and see what types of things you're feeding our souls with. And honestly, sometimes there's a lot of sad things that happen in the world. There's a lot of atrocities that still happen. We're not saying that we need to be in denial of those things. I love this idea, and I'll end with this. Paul, thanks for your question. Is that Ivone Pereira? She was known to look in her local newspaper in the obituary section. And I think the story goes, one of her friends noticed that she would do this, or she'd clip them out or something to that effect. And they thought it was really morbid and really weird. And she said, well, I look at it as an opportunity. These are the people I like to pray for them. So every time I get the paper, I get the list of names, and I sit down, and I sit and I pray for each individual person. And she would say, if she ever saw something in the news that something traumatic or horrific, or some sort of atrocity happened, she would stop and take that time to pray for that person. And we would really encourage people to do the same. That if you are watching something, if you drive by a really horrific crash, there are tendencies just to be like, oh my gosh, I wonder what happened, or you want to slow down. Stop and pray. You can't necessarily stop your car. Maybe you're the one driving, but if you're in the car with someone who's driving, take that moment to pray for that people in that moment. That needs to become more of our habit. If more of us did that, it would generate much more positive, um, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Outcomes.
Environment,
No,
outcome.
outcomes and environment. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Kirsten. And then to finalize with our questions and comments here, also Paula says in internet relationships for work and interest groups, it may be harder to discern the true quality of hearts. Thus, what sharings do you suggest?
So I think she means, because now I'm assuming she means because of COVID-19, the most people are working
Virtual
from
environment,
home. Yeah,
yeah. Mhm.
so it's much more of like a virtual, environment. So we've definitely experienced this. So it almost seems as if our interactions have decreased because, when you're in either an office setting or just in a physical setting of your work, you're passing by people and you're making comments, you're making connections, and you're seeing their facial expressions. But something, since you're asking, what do I suggest? And I don't know that there's a lot of, well, there is material online you can read. There are there's something beautiful that you can work on, and that is just communication, talking. And I've found that this actually works when I'm talking to staff members at my job. Our communication is purely either over email, text, or the phone. So, what I have found is actually setting aside some time, not every day, because who has that kind of time, but like once a week of calling. At first, I tried calling individual staff members. That took too much time. So I did kind of group calls where it's like 2 or 3 people and just kind of do check-ins where we all check in with each other. How's everybody doing? And I'd always say, I have to ask it twice. I'd always say, how's everybody doing? And I would say, we're doing okay. I'm like, okay. Now, how's everybody really doing? And then you'd hear people sigh or and say, I'm having this, it's really hard. I miss my family, I miss this or that. And taking out that 5-10 minutes, and we kind of set that tone at the beginning, saying, look, we're going to take out 10-15 minutes. We're just going to kind of decompress a little bit, check in with each other, see how everybody's doing. And, just hope that for the most part, most of the staff that we know, we have conversations with, so we know when they're talking to us that they're being honest, and we can only hope and encourage that level of transparency, whether you're dealing with work or any kind of organization, that you're setting that time aside to do check-ins with each other and say, hey, how are you doing? How are things? Because we're not in person to ask that question. So that would be my suggestion. I mean, anyone else can drop in the comment section if anyone else has any other suggestions that they find pertinent, or Leo, if you have any. That's just what I found most recently to be quite helpful with colleagues and friends and family. Really, is just doing check-ins and actually saying out loud, like, being intentional with your conversations, like, let's make this time to be transparent with one another. Let's make this time to talk about what's important to us and, find our whys. And it looks like you're putting a comment up here with Chris. That's what I like about our online SSB WebEx meetings. We get to check in on each other since we don't see each other in person. Yes, and probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but I wish we had a little bit more. And I'm actually, I'm going to address that at a later time, but be nice to do something more, because we don't have that same, because we miss our community. We miss our community at the SSB. We miss seeing everybody. But I think we agree with Chris. We do our best to connect with one another.
And I think the meaningfulness also comes from choosing something to do something positive, right? To present something positive, and I think that goes a long ways. This question, it is so truthful. Because a lot of times we are, and it's okay to look for a specific level of, let's say, a positive return. One of the things that I think it's important is for us to present ourselves in a genuine way, right, an authentic way. That, look, I'm looking to find out truly how you're feeling, and also to not be afraid to show how you're feeling as well. If you feel in despair, if you're feeling this way, if you're feeling that way, or if you're feeling overwhelmed, at work sometimes I do a lot of that. Look, guys, right now I'm really overwhelmed. So if I'm frowning, it's not that I'm upset at this person or that situation. It's just that right now I'm burned out. And I tell everybody, look, if you're feeling that way, go take a break, go drink some water, do something that, you need, that moment to kind of, recompose yourself. Dealing with the public is not easy, as you mentioned. I mean, when you're in an environment that, everybody's sick, guess what? It's going to be overwhelming. So it's important to make sure that you acknowledge the emotion, that you also not afraid to say it, as well as give yourself the ability to receive from others when they are in need of help as well. So if we have that intent in mind in our hearts, I think others will perceive it and they will embark in the same condition without showing things that perhaps are not there, or present themselves in a way that they're truly are not feeling that way. So that is a great question. I think it's important for us to be genuine, right? Be authentic. So Kirsten, I have no words to again describe this amazing work that you're starting here today with us. And
Thank you.
really, I mean, we'll be praying that we continue to on this work together, so that perhaps we bring more health, a healthy environment to all of us. I actually we received a message early from Dione, and Dione mentioned to us that she is using this book in her God at Home. So I want to
Mm,
extend the idea here. Why not,
I
right?
love that. Yeah,
Book
I love that.
and read in your utilize in your God at Home, and then you will be able to bring us new perspectives as well as we are developing this. I like the idea. I am really thinking about it, and I think that we are doing other things right now at home, but it may be a really nice way to work at home and follow these teachings with you as well. So reminders for, if we can say it that way. But I want to again thank everyone for the participation. The new ways that you found to make sure that everyone is connected with you, right? Dropping the
Mm,
emojis.
yeah,
But on that note, I would like to thank you and ask you to say our final prayer so we can bid farewell to everyone, and hoping that everyone have a wonderful weekend.
sure, absolutely. So join me in taking a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. One more time. We thank our dear mentors and guides, our beloved Creator, for being able to bless us this evening as we join virtually one another to our hearts, to these ideas and ideals. We are so grateful to have encountered the blessing of these teachings of this community. And we pray for those who weren't and aren't as fortunate as we are, for those who are suffering, for those who have fallen ill from COVID-19 and who have made their passage back to the spirit realm. We pray for all those across the globe, hundreds of thousands of souls who have made this passage. And we pray for all those souls that are still here on planet Earth, that are still struggling or just living their lives. We ask that this loving vibration from our small meeting be like a great rainbow that can be shown to hundreds of thousands of people to bring hope, to bring solace, to bring peace to those hearts that are hurting. We pray for our community. We pray for our city, for our government. We pray for the planet and all world leaders, that their hearts might be turned to love, to goodness, and may be united in following the teachings that Christ brought of loving our neighbor and forgiveness. We thank you, and so be it.
Thank you.